So welcome to session 4 of the Ignite Spirituality course. And today we're going to look at the topic of angels, and we're going to look at 6 main areas. So we're going to look at what is an angel, how do angels compare to humans, what are angels like, what do they look like, and what do they do? And then we're going to look at the relationship between angels and humans. So firstly then, what is an angel? Well, angels are spiritual beings, and some of the things that describe them is that they are an intermediary between the spiritual world and the physical world. Or they can be seen as divine messengers. They are bringing spiritual messages to people. The name angel actually means messenger, and angels can also be seen as being divine helpers, so someone who comes and helps people. So we've got 3 key areas to look at. They work between the spiritual world and the physical world. They bring messages and they provide assistance. So can you think of anything else that you believe angels do? You might want to pause the video now and have a discussion in your group. So let's consider now how angels compare to humans. We've already said that angels are spiritual beings, but humans are both physical and spiritual beings. You know, we're both. Angels live in the spiritual realm and they visit the physical realm, and that's when we see them. But normally they reside in the spiritual realm. Humans obviously normally live in the physical realm. But here's a question for you. Can humans visit the spiritual realm, or do we just connect with the spiritual realm, with our senses? What do you think? Now, moving on and looking at some other ways in which angels compare to humans. Some people believe that humans become angels when we die. But humans and angels are actually quite different. We may meet angels when we die, but we're not transformed to become angels when we die. When we die, we move into the spiritual realm and we gain spiritual bodies. So we lose our physical bodies when we leave the physical world. Effectively, we become spiritual beings and live in the spiritual realm. Now we're going to look at that in a lot more detail when we move on to consider life and death next week. But it's something that we need to start to consider here. Our physical bodies carry us when we're here living on the physical earth. But if we move into the spiritual realm, then we gain a spiritual body. Okay, let's park that one for a moment and move on. So what are angels like? Here are some things that describe angels. Angels actually live forever. They don't get old and die like we do. They're adults, but they don't age. If you think about it, that our physical body ages, but you've probably noticed that every year you get older, you don't necessarily feel the age that you are. In your spirit and your soul, you become more mature. We learn things, but we don't age in the way that our bodies do. Angels can also suddenly appear and suddenly disappear, but they can only be in one place at one time. They can't be in multiple places. So an angel can be somewhere and then be transported somewhere else very quickly. And what about the way in which angels move? Well, when they're in the spiritual realm, they can float and they can fly, but they don't necessarily have wings. And they usually have male names. You might have noticed that. They have names like Gabriel and Michael. But actually gender isn't relevant to an angel because they don't have partners and they don't have children. So the next thing that we're going to consider is, what do angels look like? We obviously see many artistic interpretations of what people think angels look like. They're often represented as we see in this picture. They look like a human person, often with wings and a long robe. And obviously this one is sitting on a cloud and playing a harp, just to give the impression of peace and tranquility. And angels are also thought to radiate light. But actually, many angels are warriors and are more likely to carry a sword than a harp. Just like in the physical world, there are battles in the spiritual world, and angels need to fight. But something to think about when you consider stories about humans who encounter angels, they often just look like humans. And we're going to see some examples of this as we look at some video. The first video that we're going to look at is the story of a guy called Roy Godwin. He was involved in a very serious road accident and encountered an angel.
One frosty evening in December 1981, Roy Godwin was driving with his wife and children.
We were travelling on a main road, quite a wide main road, through a forest. And suddenly there were 4 headlights side by side, immediately in front of us, one car overtaking the other. I instinctively pulled the car to the left onto the grass verge, but the car that was in front of me hit us head on. It was very serious indeed. I was quite clear that I was dying. Both the police and an ambulance came. Smoke started to come up from the front of the car, and they needed to get everybody out. They couldn't get me out because I was well and truly trapped in there.
Roy believes that whilst he was waiting to be freed from the damaged vehicle, something quite miraculous happened.
I was alone in the car. Suddenly through the darkness came a figure, and he walked very steadily and clearly straight between the trees, through the forest, which was impenetrable, certainly at that time with brambles. But he walked in a straight line, straight to the side of the car. And he climbed in. The seat was covered with broken glass, but he simply sat there. He was wearing a coat with a hood up, didn't see his face, but he put his arm straight across my shoulder. It felt as though I'd been plugged into the mains. This incredible force and power was just continuously flooding through me. After a while, the ambulance men came over and said that they were taking my family off to hospital. And at that point, this person who was sitting by me climbed out of the car and said with a very strong and clear voice, "Stop." And he said to the ambulance man, "You're to bring his wife over here to him." And they brought her over to me. And then he spoke to me. He said, "Man, you are to know that your wife and children and you as a family will be together again and whole, and you are to disregard anything else that anyone tells you."
What was the reaction of the doctors when you got to hospital and they saw your injuries?
I was wheeled straight into theatre, and they asked me to sign a form giving them permission to amputate my left foot and lower leg. And I couldn't give them that permission, because all I could hear was, "You are to disregard anything that anyone else says. You and your family will be together and you'll be whole." And so I didn't have my foot amputated, and I have it today, and we're doing very well together. One of the things I was concerned was that because of the seriousness of my injuries, I dreamt it all, as it were. But some weeks after the accident, the police turned up unannounced, and they had 2 questions. Given the extent of the damage to the car, they wanted to know whether I had any explanation as to how it was that I was still alive. And then their second question was about the figure who was in the car with me, who had carried such authority that they had unhesitatingly obeyed it. It seems to me as though God sent an angel to help me. I knew I wasn't abandoned. I knew I wasn't on my own. I was clear that God was going to carry me through where I was, and I felt loved.
So you'll notice from this story, the angel was sent to comfort, but also to give a message. And the angel also took control of the situation. So when we look at what angels do, we see here that they assist, protect, and guide humans during life. But we're also going to explore how we relate to angels during death and also during the transition between life and death. People often talk about meeting angels when they're in extreme danger. So it's most likely that we would encounter an angel if we are in a situation of danger or extreme stress. So do you think you've ever encountered an angel? We're going to look at another story now of someone who was in danger and then an angel came to assist them. His name's Paul Cowley.
One of the highlights of my military career was I got to lead an expedition to Mount Kenya with a really close friend of mine. When we were climbing, my colleague got into a bit of trouble and I had to do an emergency abseil. He had 5 soldiers, I had 5 soldiers. His 5 had got stuck on the mountain and he'd done an emergency abseil to get them off. Unfortunately, when he was halfway through that, his rope came away from the mountain. The guys were still on a ledge and he plummeted to his death. I was involved in trying to rescue his 5 soldiers. And I scooted up the mountain, a bit like climbing a tree. You get up there easy, it's hard to get down. And at one point I was really stuck and I couldn't reach them. And I was in a panic because I couldn't reach them and they're possibly going to die. And then I realized I was going to die. I was stuck, I couldn't get down. And I leaned into the mountain and I remember saying, God, I don't want to die. And at that point, I felt this tap on my shoulder, which was really weird and scary. And I turned and there was this guy stood next to me who didn't speak, who just kind of pushed me into the mountain, roped me up, walked past me, went round this ledge that I couldn't get by to the 5 soldiers, abseiled all those off, came back round the ledge, unhooked me, abseiled me down to safety, and then disappeared. And the soldiers, young soldiers, said to me, boss, it's a good job you brought that guy up to help us. And I said, I didn't bring anybody. We got down to base camp, I got on the radio, I said, was there anyone else up here on Mount Kenya? Was anybody climbing? No, you're the only military unit that's on the whole mountain. I said, did you send them? No, nothing. So that was a weird experience that got us off that mountain. And you would think an encounter like that would make you drop to your knees and worship God. I mean, it didn't for me. And it was 4 years later, I think on an Alpha course, I was looking through the Bible and I came to a piece of scripture in the book of Hebrews. I think it's Hebrews 1 verse 14. And it says that angels are ministering spirits that are sent to those that will inherit salvation. And I remember having a moment thinking, so God sent an angel to help me and those 5 guys get off that rock face, to get to safety. And then it takes me 4 years that I inherit salvation. And that was an amazing moment for me, finding that. It's when for me, I think, that the Bible started to be really powerful and speaking into my life.
So in that story, we can see that the angel appeared to be a person, a very competent person. They took control of the situation and saved many lives. And then they just disappeared. And notice that they didn't talk much. They just got on with the job that they came to do. Something I'd like us to do now is look a bit deeper into the relationship between angels and humans. We're going to look at 3 things. Do we have guardian angels? How do we communicate with angels? And what happens when we die? So first then, do we have guardian angels? Now there's a popular idea out there that angels are assigned to specific people throughout their lives to watch over them and to help them. It's like a one-to-one relationship. I've got a guardian angel and you've got a guardian angel. So for every single human on earth, there would be an angel assigned to them. Also, people often believe that angels act independently. So I could ask an angel to do something for me and they could decide whether or not they were going to do it. But there is another way to look at this. You see, angels need not necessarily be assigned to particular people, but they can still help them. Angels could be assigned to a task rather than a person. So there can be things that an angel is directed to do, and those things might not be directly related to one person, but could relate to a group of people. Angels can also be assigned to locations or regions. There can be spiritual tasks that they need to carry out, which are bigger and more important than looking after you or me. So with this understanding, we see that angels work under authority. They're assigned to people or groups of people. They may be given tasks, which could be physical tasks, or they could be spiritual tasks. And the one who gives them these roles is God. God sends angels to help humans, and he directs what they should do and when they should do it. And some of the tasks which he directs them to do are a direct result of humans asking for help. So let's listen to another story now of how a human asked for help and what happened as a result. There's a baby critically ill in hospital when help arrives.
My story took place about 10 years ago in Tucson, Arizona. My grandson was only 5 months old at the time. He was very sick and was in the hospital with needles and tubes inserted into various parts of his little body. He had been vomiting for days on end, dehydrating. The cause was unknown, but he was getting worse. My daughter and her husband were glued to his bedside, but exhaustion was beginning to set in. That is when I decided to pray. I walked over to the crucifix that my great-grandmother had brought with her from Ireland and prayed. I asked God to please send Jordan an angel and to heal him. The next morning, I packed a few things to take with me to the hospital. It was a beautiful, sunny July day in 2001. I got to the hospital and sent my son and daughter-in-law home. The room was so dark and dismal. Even with the curtains open, it didn't seem to allow much light into the room. Suddenly the door opened, and without anyone turning on the light switch, the room brightened. In walked a small framed woman, perhaps in her early 50s. What struck me first was how the room lit up, but then I noticed that she was dressed in clothes from the 1940s. She wore dark glasses, had dark hair swept up in a nice but conservative hairstyle. She had a black dress. She also carried the same type of old-fashioned pocketbook that my grandmother used to carry around. I said hello and asked her if she was the doctor. She didn't answer me, but walked right up to the baby, picked him up and cradled him in her arms. She smiled at him and then slowly placed him back in his bed. She then rubbed his head and rubbed his belly, and I just watched in silence. She turned to me, smiled, and said, "He'll be fine." She turned around and then walked out the front door. I immediately called up my daughter and asked if that was Jordan's doctor. My daughter said that Jordan had a male doctor, but she would call the nurse's desk. The nurse told her that no one went in or out of that room but me. The baby was released from the hospital the very next day.
So we can see here how the angel who turned up just looked like a human, a normal human. Now, obviously, they did look a bit out of place because their style of dress was a little unusual. But because it was a woman and she was quite small, she wasn't threatening. And so she put the woman at ease and could provide the assistance to the baby that was needed. Do you also notice in both this story and the story of Roy Godwin, the angel provides healing? Through their touch, they heal the human. Roy experienced heat like electricity going through his body. So let's move on now and think about how we can communicate with angels. as we can see from these stories, if an angel appears as a human, we can simply speak to them normally. Now, we see in these stories, the angels didn't actually want to hold a conversation. They just came to carry out a task. They provided assistance or gave a message of comfort and hope. But angels can communicate with us in many ways. They can communicate with us through dreams and visions. And when this happens, the angel will tend to look like a traditional angel rather than a human, so that we understand who's speaking. We can see this in many different stories in the Bible, but also different experiences that people have today. And when we communicate with an angel in a dream or a vision, then we will communicate with them through our minds, effectively through telepathy. So we're going to think a little bit more now about what happens when we die and the involvement that angels have in that. We've got another video about a tragic accident.
Yeah, so obviously things changed in July 2016 when Natasha, aged 15 and a half, went on a flight to Nice with her best friend Bethany,
Yes.
which was going to be a treat for her.
Yeah.
And of course that memory is probably still very emotionally painful for you, but could you share some things about that?
Yeah, so it was in 2016 in July, as you say, and Natasha's best friend Bethany, who was 14 at the time, Natasha was 15, they decided they really wanted to go have a little holiday together, a break. And Natasha wanted to show her the sort of summer holidays that we as a family would typically have, which was in the south of France each year. And so we decided that the two girls, Bethany, Natasha, and myself, so three of us, would go to France just for 4 or 5 days and stay in an apartment that our family has there. So, and it was for me, very routine in the sense that getting on another plane, again, it was like a taxi service for me in terms of the way I just worked with planes. So very normal experience. And being with Natasha and watching out for her foods and everything, again, very normal. However, it went very, very wrong, really shockingly wrong, that you could not believe as a father, as a parent, such a thing would happen. That we got caught out by buying a sandwich from a well-known sandwich chain in the Heathrow airport that had a label on it that said what the ingredients are, or what we didn't know, it was partial ingredients and not all the ingredients. And we would always look at all the food and check and so forth, and Natasha was adept with a really 20/20 vision to check it. She ate the sandwich, we boarded the plane, she started to feel really unwell. Clearly there was a problem, and as the flight we were now across France on a 2-hour flight, she started to get worse and worse and had problems breathing. And that was because she was actually having what's called an anaphylactic reaction, the most powerful kind of reaction you can have to something. In this case, of food. And it turned out to be sesame seeds. That sandwich was packed with sesame seeds, hidden, baked into the dough of the bread, that we had absolutely no idea about, because it wasn't mentioned or not even visible. It was poison. And in the plane, she couldn't breathe. And I was sitting next to her, and she was been listening to music, sharing a little, one of the iPod type earphones with her friend Bethany, and they're like 14, 15-year-old girls having a good time, but then it just took a turn and went really bad. She couldn't breathe, she started suffocating, and now as a parent I knew what to do, and I'd never been in this situation. We always carried, as do most allergic people, to injections of adrenaline called automatic injection pens. We went to the toilet quickly and I injected her, and it made no difference whatsoever, which was a real shock, because that was supposed to be your insurance policy. This is the medicine, it reverses the reaction. Made no difference. It's like taken aback, and we're in the little toilet, cramped like this, and I said, Daddy, I can't breathe. And that was pretty much the final words she said to me before she died on the plane. I rushed back to the seat. I got the second pen, the backup pen, and injected her again. And at that point she fell unconscious, and that was the last words she ever said to me. Battle to save her life on the plane. Utterly horrific what was playing out. She was on the floor, dying, unconscious, and there was a junior doctor on the plane, and we were doing CPR, and I might add, I had, at this point, had no faith in God. I never have had. It's not how I've grown up at that time. And I was just willing her in my own strength to live. Say, come on, I know you've got the power, the energy, you know, the energy in your cells in your body. You can fight this. But she ended up dying on the plane in front of me. That was what actually happened. It was absolutely horrific. But then, yeah, words can't describe that really, what that's like as a father, as a parent, seeing your own child die in front of you in a prolonged and terrible way, and you can't do anything about it. You know, and I'm going back to what I said, I've been always someone who believed in my own strength and ability to control what was going to happen next. And I was totally powerless, ineffectual, had no way of turning that situation around, basically. However, something extremely dramatic happened, really dramatic, that I was never for a second imagining or could have never even thought possible. As there were last attempts to keep her alive, paramedics, everything on the plane, etc. Just the whole vision went changed in front of me as a shock, actually. Natasha's body was on the ground, alive, just still conscious, fighting for life, rigged up to the what's the machine called? CPR. The CPR machine, sorry, yeah, etc. And suddenly these 5 figures, which angels, appeared, just unbelievable, right in front of me, made of soft yellow light, bang, bam, 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 5, all moving like that, from head to toe, across Natasha's body like that, and in such detail. They were really like, I would say, human beings with wings, but the wings were certainly not feathers. They were made of more like what I'd call tessellated, so pieces like that. Not like anything like I'd grown up at art school, because I went to art school, drawing in the V&A Museum all these cherubs, which were basic human babies with feathery wings on the back. You know, nothing like that at all. They were really like us in the sense that they're quite long and slender, but with the wings. And I was so taken aback by what I saw. And they were made of soft yellow light, in intense detail. And I was so shocked, I actually realized what that meant. I think any of us, whether you have any faith or not, would know that's some kind of sign someone might be dying. You know, what is that? And I picked my hand up and just whooshed them away like that. It's not her time. Really with aggression, basically, because I was very pumped up with what was going on generally. And they just went like that, etc. All the light went, and Natasha was gone. So you can imagine. The long and short of that is, God sent angels to take my child's soul to heaven. Now, at the time, at that minute, right then and there, I didn't think that. I mean, I was just in complete play of the incredible situation that was going on. There were a lot of people there, etc. And I was holding up with one hand a bag of liquids, fluids that was drip feeding into her arms, etc. And so it was a really quite hot moment, but I remained very, very calm, because one thing, I think my background, as I said before, from business, is I do stay calm under pressure, really calm, because I've been in so many situations around the world. And I know as a parent, it makes no sense to get all agitated about a situation. It brings no benefit in that scenario. So I was very calm. I'd been talking to her non-stop for an hour, nearly an hour and a half since she'd lost consciousness. I was telling her to keep at it. Can you hear my voice? Your father, meaning me at this point, is with you. I'm here. You are not alone. So I was very calm. And then this vision, this powerful thing, filled up my whole, my whole sight. It was remarkable, yeah.
So we can see here that when the girl was dying, angels appeared to her father. So we can see here that when the girl was dying, angels appeared, and her father interpreted that immediately, that she was dying and they'd come to take her away. And he tried to sweep them away because he was so pent up. And at that point, she died. He had an open vision of what was happening in the spiritual world at that moment. So rather than just seeing the physical world, his vision opened up. It was like a curtain was drawn back and he was able to glimpse into the spiritual realm. And also he was unable to make much sense of what happened until later, until he was in a situation where he was calmer and he could reflect on the situation. We've got another video now, which explains a bit more about what happens when we die and gives us a little glimpse of heaven.
They called a code and they come running in. I was above my body. I could see them doing chest compressions. I could see them, all the nurses around. I could smell the most beautiful flowers I've ever smelled. And then I heard music. When I opened my eyes, I knew where I was. I knew I was in heaven.
In 2019, Charlotte Holmes was having a routine checkup with her cardiologist when her blood pressure spiked to 234/134.
My heart doctor said, "You're not going home. We're going to put you in the hospital. We've got to get that blood pressure down. It's got to come down. You're having another stroke, or you're going to have a heart attack." They put me in a room and started an IV just to, try to get that blood pressure down.
Charlotte's husband, Danny, stayed with her while the hospital staff tended to her.
Immediately, they called this code, and everybody started rushing in. They just started working on her. And my feelings was, I thought, well, I'm wondering if I'm even going to be able to bring her home.
Charlotte began describing things to Danny.
She started talking about the flowers. Well, I looked around and I knew there was no flowers in that room. That's when I knew she was not in this world when that was going on.
Charlotte's heart stopped. For the next 11 minutes, she was clinically dead.
I was above my body. I could see Danny standing in the corner. He had backed up. I could see them, all the nurses around. Then I opened my eyes. I looked around at the beauty. I could see the trees. I could see the grass. And everything was swaying with the music, because everything in heaven worships God. I can't convey to you what heaven looked like, because it's so above what we can even imagine, 1,000,000 times.
Charlotte says she was led into heaven by angels.
There's no fear. It's like pure joy. When the angels takes over, there's no fear. When you're going home, it's pure joy.
She says she then began to recognize deceased family members.
I seen my mom. I seen my dad. I seen my sister. I seen family members standing behind. I seen saints of old. See, they didn't look old. They didn't look sick. None of them wore glasses. They looked like they were in their 30s. But yet it says in the scriptures, we will be known as we were known. I knew them there, in their new bodies. They looked wonderful.
What Charlotte saw after that, however, shocked her.
Standing behind my mom and dad was a light so bright. I couldn't look upon it. I mean, it was so bright. But I knew it was my Heavenly Father. I seen a toddler. And that toddler, I couldn't understand. And I can remember thinking, who is this? And I heard my Father say to me, my Heavenly Father say to me, it's your child. I lost that child. I was 5.5 months pregnant. I can remember them holding the baby up and saying, Charlotte, it's a boy. Then he was gone. So when I seen this toddler, I said, God, how is that possible? He says, they continue to grow in heaven, but there's no time. It's eternity. So 48 years, and here my child, our child, is a toddler.
Then God chose to show her one.
So we see in this story how she had an out-of-body experience and could smell flowers. Initially, she could talk to her husband and describe what she saw, but then she died. She had a glimpse of heaven and saw a beautiful garden, and she said angels led her to heaven. She also saw relatives and other people she recognised who died, but they all appeared to be about 30 years old. She then saw a bright light and knew immediately that it was God. She could speak to God and ask him to explain who that child was that she saw. And then she discovered that it was her own child that had died. But the child was still just a toddler because time moves very slowly in heaven. Now, this video opens up a lot of questions, so next time we're going to take a much more detailed look at near-death experiences and what we can learn from them. But one final thing to cover today is very briefly to look at the subject of demons and how they relate to angels and humans. We've already touched on this subject when we were discussing dreams. But how do demons compare to angels? As we saw at the beginning of this session, angels are messengers or helpers for humans, and they're sent by God to work under his authority. They only do what he tells them to do. Demons, on the other hand, are spiritual beings just like angels, but they refuse to do what he tells them. They work to oppose humans rather than to help them, and they actively try and cause chaos and destruction, both in our minds and in our bodies. Now, many people don't believe in demons. They think they're just a figment of our imagination, like a fairy story. People seem much more happy to believe in angels than demons. So why do you think that is? Perhaps you might like to ask some of your friends about it this week and find out what they believe and whether they've had any experiences of angels or demons. Well, that's all we're going to look at this week. Next time, we're going to look at near-death experiences and see how that will help us to understand what happens when we die. So until next time.